I cut out my own son's tongue and killed his wife. They called me old hag for years while planning to get rid of me. I found out too late what they wanted to do to me. Now I'll die in prison, but they'll never speak again. Hello, my dear viewers. I'm Eleanor Reed, 73 years old, and I'm here in this little gray room in Oakville, Nebraska. Not exactly where I imagined I'd spend my final days, but life takes us down unexpected paths, doesn't it? I've always been a simple, hard-working woman who raised a son alone after becoming widowed at a young age. Here at the Women's Correctional Facility, I've found a way to pass the time. I do crochet. I learned from other elderly ladies who are also here. My old, wrinkled hands that once did such terrible things now create beautiful things. Ironic, isn't it? I started making these little doilies to occupy my mind, to avoid thinking about what brought me here. The guards even let me keep my needles because they say I'm a model inmate. If they only knew what these hands have done. Every morning, I wake up at 5 o'clock. A lifetime habit doesn't fade, not even behind bars. I make my bed neatly, just as my mother taught me back in Millfield, where I was born. Then I drink the coffee they serve here. It's nothing like the fresh coffee I used to make in my own home, but it wakes me up. And then I begin my crochet work, making each little stitch with care, as if each thread could tell the story of my life. Some of the younger inmates call me Grandma. I guess it's because I always have some advice to give, a story to tell. I don't tell them mine, of course. I save that for you, watching from the other side of the screen. Perhaps my story can serve as a warning to someone. And you, my dear viewers, tell me in the comments, what little town are you watching me from? And what time of day did you find this old lady's video? Was it early morning, drinking your hot coffee, or late afternoon, as the sun was setting? I imagine you on the other side, and it warms my heart here in this cold place. Tell me in the comments, okay? Also, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories from other ladies like me. But before I get lost in memories, let me tell you what brought me here. How a dedicated mother ended up becoming a murderer in her 60s. How an elderly lady who only wanted the best for her son ended up cutting out his tongue. It's a story of betrayal, of cruelty, and of how even the sweetest person can transform when treated like garbage by those they should be able to trust. It all began many years ago in my childhood, when I still believed the world could be a good place. I was born in Millfield, Nebraska in 1952. My father, Arthur Reed, worked at the steel mill like almost all the men in that region. He'd come home every day with his face so black with soot that only his bright blue eyes showed through. Mama, Edith Wilcox Reed, washed his clothes separately from ours because they were so full of grime. She used to say, "The mill gives us bread, but takes a little piece of us each day." And it did. Daddy died of lung disease before he turned 50. There were 4 of us children, me, the oldest, then came George, Sarah, and the youngest, Johnny. Our house was small, wooden, with a big yard where we played. The dirt floor became smooth from all our running around. Mama had a flower garden in front and a vegetable patch out back. I learned early on to care for plants, to recognize each herb. I didn't know that knowledge would one day be used differently. Our life was simple, but we didn't go hungry. Daddy was a hard-working man, respected in the community. During the 4th of July celebrations, he always helped with the organization. I remember him coming home proud. "Look, Edith, the pastor asked me to be in charge of the parade." Mama would smile, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She knew the mill was slowly taking his strength. At school, I was a good student. Miss Parker always said, "Eleanor has a future. She's got a good head on her shoulders." I enjoyed studying, reading books I could borrow. I dreamed of being a teacher someday. But in those days, a girl from a simple family had a different path laid out for her. The games of my childhood were simple. We played hopscotch in the yard, jumped rope, played tag between the clothes Mama hung on the line. On the way to school, my best friend Betty and I would pick cherries. We'd come back with purple mouths, and Mama already knew where we'd stopped. On Sundays, after service at the First Methodist Church, the whole family gathered for lunch. Mama made traditional fried chicken with potato salad, all washed down with lemonade from our own tree. Afterward, the adults played cards while we children played in the yard. Those were simple times, but happy ones. It was during this time that I began learning crochet from Grandma Dorothy. She had magical hands, making the needle dance between her fingers. "Girl," she'd say, "someday these hands will give you sustenance and comfort." I didn't quite understand what she meant, but I loved watching the doilies and shawls take shape. When I was 11, the first tragedy of my life occurred. My brother George got sick with rheumatic fever. Back then, medical care was poor in Millfield. I remember Daddy carrying him in his arms to the only hospital in town, begging for treatment. He was hospitalized for weeks, and I watched Mama waste away with worry. When he came home, he was weak, thin, his heart damaged. 2 months later, on a rainy dawn, George didn't wake up. It was the first time I saw my family fall apart. Daddy, always so strong, cried like a child. Mama was silent for days, pushing food around without eating. As the oldest, I had to keep the household running, care for the younger siblings. I realized then, at just 11 years old, that life could be cruel, that it took without warning. After George's death, everything changed at home. Daddy started drinking after work. He'd come home late, smelling of whiskey and steel dust. Mama suffered in silence. I could hear her crying secretly in the bedroom when she thought we were asleep. I started taking on more responsibilities, helping in the kitchen, doing laundry, looking after my siblings. At school, I wasn't the same student anymore. Miss Parker called me aside one day. "What happened to you, Eleanor? Where's that girl who dreamed of being a teacher?" I didn't have the courage to tell her that dreams had become small in the face of reality, that now I only thought about surviving one day at a time. It was during this time that I met Howard, the son of the owner of the general store where we bought on credit. He was 5 years older than me, already working with his father. He always gave me a piece of candy when I came shopping. He looked at me in a special way, made me feel special. Still a girl, I began to dream about him. Little did I know that this meeting would change the entire course of my life, that this man would be the father of my only son, and that years later, because of this same son, I would end up here, telling this story to you from inside a prison. Life has these ironies, you know? Sometimes you plant roses and harvest thorns. But I didn't know that yet when, at 12 years old, I saw my childhood slipping away and turning into young womanhood, with grown-up responsibilities and naive dreams in my heart. By 15, I was no longer a child. With Daddy's health deteriorating because of the mill dust, I had to work. I got a job as a counter girl at Mrs. Henderson's bakery in downtown Millfield. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning, help Mama with breakfast, and leave while it was still dark to arrive at 6 at the bakery. The smell of bread coming out of the oven was a blessing, but the backaches from standing all day were the price I paid. Howard continued to look at me in that special way. He was already 20, a grown man, respected in the community. One day, he waited for me outside the bakery. "Eleanor, let me walk you home." That was the first time we really talked. He told me about his plans to expand his father's store, to build a better life. I listened, enchanted, imagining that maybe, just maybe, I could be part of those plans. We started dating in secret. Daddy didn't approve. He said Howard was too old for me, that a merchant's son doesn't mix with a mill worker's daughter. But I was in love, believed we had a future together. We'd meet on Sunday afternoons, after church, while everyone thought I was at Betty's house. It was on one of those afternoons that Howard took me to the creek. The water ran calmly, the trees made shade. "Let's get married, Eleanor," he said, holding my hands. "I'll speak to your father." My heart raced. It was everything I wanted to hear. Daddy, as expected, didn't take it well. "My daughter won't marry at 16, and not to a man who's old enough to know better," he shouted, coughing between words. But Howard was persistent. He came back the next day, and the next, always bringing something. Cough medicine for Daddy, the finest flour for Mama. And then came the final blow. One afternoon, coming back from the bakery, I found Mama crying in the kitchen. "What's wrong, Mom?" I asked, frightened. "Your father's in the hospital. He collapsed at the mill." I ran there, but it was too late. Daddy, at 47, had passed away, leaving Mama with 3 children and a house to support. It was Howard who paid for the funeral. It was he who helped us with expenses in the following months. And it was he who, 3 months later, formally asked Mama for my hand in marriage. "Mrs. Reed, I promise to take care of Eleanor and help you with the other children," he said solemnly. Mama, worried about the future, accepted. We married in a simple ceremony at the First Methodist Church. I was 16, he was 21. I went to live in the house behind the general store. Married life wasn't what I had dreamed. Howard worked from dawn to dusk at the store, and I had to take care of the house. I couldn't work at the bakery anymore. "My wife doesn't need to work outside the home," he said. I spent most of my time alone, while he attended to female customers with his broad smile, always flirting. A year after the wedding, I became pregnant with Jason, my only son. The pregnancy was difficult. I spent days nauseous, weak. Howard complained about the lack of attention, the poorly cooked food, the messy house. It was the first time I saw his look change. It was no longer the look of the enamored young man, but a critical, hard look. "You look ugly like this, Eleanor," he said one night. "I don't even want to come near you." When Jason was born in 1970, I thought things would improve. A son, strong, the spitting image of his father. But Howard hardly appeared at home. I heard rumors in the neighborhood that he was getting involved with a customer from the store, Mr. Wilson's widow. I cried secretly, breastfeeding my son, feeling increasingly alone. One night, he came home drunk. The smell of cheap perfume gave away where he'd been. I confronted him, with the baby in my arms. "Who do you think you are to question me?" he shouted. "Look at you. You look like an old woman worn out. If I took you out of poverty, it was out of pity, and now I regret it." That was the first time he raised a hand to me. The slap hit my face, hard, making me stagger with the baby in my arms. That night marked the beginning of hell. Howard transformed. The gentleman who gave me candy became a monster at home. He drank almost every night, spent the store's money on women, came back to take out his frustration on me. "You're useless, Eleanor," he would say between blows. "If it weren't for the boy, I would have sent you back to your mother's house." I endured it silently because of Jason. That baby was everything to me. I cared for him with all my love, dreaming that one day he would be different from his father, that he would be a good man, that he would make me proud. I sang to him to sleep, told him stories, kissed every little scratch. "My son," I would whisper when we were alone, "you will be the light of my life, my redemption." When Jason was 2, the situation became unbearable. Howard was sinking the store into debt because of his drinking. Suppliers no longer wanted to sell on credit. Customers were beginning to look elsewhere. One night, he came home even more drunk than usual. "It's your fault," he shouted, breaking plates in the kitchen. "If you were a real woman, I wouldn't need to seek comfort in drink." That night, the beating was so violent that I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Nurse Sarah, who took care of me, looked at me with pity. "You can't go back to him," she said softly. "Next time, you might not survive." My face was unrecognizable in the mirror. 3 broken ribs, right arm fractured, bruises all over my body. "Where is my son?" I asked desperately. "He's with your husband," Sarah replied. "He said it was a mugging, that he found you like this on the street." My heart froze. I had to go back. I had to protect my Jason. I couldn't leave him in the hands of that man. Against medical advice, I returned home 3 days later. Howard seemed remorseful. He had cleaned the house, prepared food. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," he said, crying. "I don't know what came over me. I swear it will never happen again." I wanted to believe, for Jason, for our future. For a few weeks, he controlled himself. He went back to working properly at the store, stopped drinking, was attentive with our son. I kept hope alive, but slept with one eye open, always alert. I started hiding some of the money he gave me for groceries, keeping it in a hole I made under the kitchen floorboards. It was my insurance, in case I needed to flee with Jason someday. It was on a Sunday afternoon that fate knocked at our door. Howard was in the yard, fixing a chair, when he suddenly fell, clutching his chest. I ran to him, screaming for help. The neighbors helped take him to the hospital, but it was too late. Massive heart attack, the doctor said. At 21, I was a widow with a 3-year-old son to raise. The pain I felt wasn't for the husband I lost, but for the father Jason wouldn't have. For the uncertain future awaiting us. The store was full of debts. We had to sell it to pay creditors. With the little that was left, I rented a simple little house and started selling homemade sweets and savories. The money I had hidden helped me in the first few months until I built up a regular clientele. They were difficult years, but I had a purpose, to raise my Jason to be a good man. I worked from dawn to dusk, sometimes into the night, preparing orders. My hands cracked from washing dishes, my eyes burned from cutting onions. But when I looked at my son sleeping, I knew every sacrifice was worth it. Jason grew up strong, intelligent. At school, he was always praised by teachers. "Your son has a future, Mrs. Williams," they would say. I saved every penny to ensure his education. I dreamed he would be a doctor, engineer, someone important. At 18, Jason got a scholarship to study business administration in Lincoln. It was the greatest joy of my life, but also the greatest pain. My son was leaving the nest. "Mom," he said before boarding, "I'll make you proud of me. One day, I'll give you the life of a queen." I cried, hugging him, feeling as if a piece of my heart was being torn out. I stayed alone in Millfield, continuing with my small pastry business. The solitude weighed heavily, but Jason's letters brought me joy. He told me about his studies, his new friends, his plans. I kept each letter like a treasure, rereading them in moments of loneliness. What I didn't know is that, away from my eyes, my son was changing. That sweet boy I raised was turning into someone I wouldn't recognize. And that years later, he would make me relive the nightmare I lived with his father in an even more cruel way. Because this time, the betrayal would come from the person I loved most in the world. The years passed. Jason graduated with honors in business administration and got a good job at an export company in Oakville. "Mom," he said in a phone call, "I'm earning well. I want you to come live with me. Enough of working so hard." My heart swelled with pride. My boy had become a successful man, as I had always dreamed. At 45, I sold my little house in Millfield, said goodbye to neighbors and customers, and left for Oakville. Jason was waiting for me at the bus station, elegant in a dark suit. I barely recognized my boy, now a tall, strong man with an imposing bearing. "Welcome to your new life, Mom," he said, hugging me. His house was beautiful, in an upper-middle-class neighborhood. It had 3 bedrooms, a well-kept garden, new furniture. "Your room is this one," he showed proudly. It was a bright room with a comfortable bed, a large wardrobe. "You deserve the best after so much sacrifice." I cried with emotion. Finally, after so many years of struggle, I could rest. In the first few months, it was like a dream. Jason introduced me to his work colleagues, took me out to dinner, gave me presents. I took care of the house with affection, prepared the foods he liked since childhood, kept everything in order. At night, we talked about his day at work, about plans for the future. "I'm going to buy a bigger house," he would say, "with a pool for you to enjoy on hot days." It was on one of those nights that he introduced me to Melissa, a beautiful young woman from a traditional Oakville family. "We're serious," he said, holding her hand. Melissa smiled at me, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mrs. Williams, Jason talks so much about you. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Something in her look bothered me. It was cold, calculating, but I swallowed my intuition. If my son had chosen her, who was I to question? Welcome to the family, my dear, I replied, hugging her. Jason looked radiant. Their wedding happened 6 months later, a luxurious ceremony with more than 200 guests. Melissa's family was influential in Oakville. Her father owned an important investment firm. Her mother organized charity events. I felt out of place in that environment, with my simple dress bought especially for the occasion. Melissa's aunts looked me up and down, whispering among themselves. I heard one of them comment, "So, that's his mother? I thought she was the maid." After the wedding, Melissa moved into the house. My room was transferred to the smallest one, at the back of the house, next to the laundry room. "It's temporary, Mom," explained Jason. "Soon we'll buy a bigger house." I accepted without complaining. After all, it was fair that the couple have their space. That's when things started to change. Melissa took control of the house. My recipes were no longer welcome. "We're going to hire a maid," she said. "You've worked too much already." I felt useless, a burden. I spent my days sitting on the back porch, looking at the small garden with nothing to do. I tried to get closer to Melissa, teaching crochet stitches, offering help with house decoration. But she always had an excuse. She was busy, had appointments, needed to rest. Gradually, I began to notice the looks of contempt, the impatient sighs when I entered the living room, the doors that closed when I approached. Jason started coming home later and later from work. When he was home, he locked himself in the office or went out with friends. We rarely talked like before. In just 1 year, my son transformed into a stranger. One night, I heard an argument in their room. "How much longer do we have to put up with your mother here?" Melissa shouted. "She's always in the middle, giving opinions on everything, looking at me as if I were the intruder." I waited, heart tight, for my son's response. I expected him to defend me, to remember everything I had sacrificed for him. "Be patient, honey," was his response. "I can't simply send her away. What would people think?" It wasn't love or gratitude that made him keep me there. It was just appearances, what others would say. That night, I cried, hidden in my room, as I hadn't cried since the days with Howard. History was repeating itself, in a different way, but equally painful. I was again trapped in a house where I wasn't welcome, dependent on someone who didn't value me. The following months were of constant deterioration. Melissa stopped disguising her contempt. In front of Jason, she was all fake smiles, but when we were alone, she completely ignored me or made cruel comments. "That dress looks horrible on you," she would say. Or, "Why don't you cut that hair? You look like a witch." One day, returning from the supermarket, I found my belongings rifled through. My old photos, the letters Jason sent me from college, my few pieces of jewelry, everything scattered on the bed. I confronted Melissa, who shrugged. "I was looking for space to store some things. This room is too small for so much junk." Jason, when I told him, minimized the incident. "Mom, you're exaggerating. Melissa was just trying to help organize your things." It was as if I were going crazy, imagining persecutions. I began to doubt my own perception. It was when Melissa got pregnant that things drastically worsened. The news, which should have been cause for joy, came accompanied by an ultimatum. "Now we need your mother's room for the baby," she told Jason in front of me. "She can stay in the maid's room next to the laundry." The little room was nothing more than a cubicle without windows, used to store cleaning supplies. It had space only for a single bed and a nightstand. The smell of chemical products permeated the air. "It's just temporary, Mom," repeated Jason, without looking me in the eyes. "Until we find a better place for you." As Melissa's belly grew, I became increasingly invisible in that house. During visits from her family, I wasn't introduced. I was restricted to the kitchen or my little room. On the rare occasions when I appeared in the living room, I heard comments like, "Oh, your mother is still living here?" Jason, the sweet boy for whom I sacrificed everything, now treated me like an inconvenience. He didn't defend me from humiliations, didn't care about my isolation. On some occasions I noticed that he himself avoided talking to me in front of friends or Melissa's family. The situation reached its peak when, serving coffee one afternoon when Melissa's parents were visiting, my hand trembled and I spilled some on the center table. "See that?" exclaimed Melissa's mother. "I think it's time to look for a nursing home. Elderly people need special care." I was only 63, in full health. I waited for my son to respond, to say that I was still young, capable, lucid. Instead, he agreed. "We're already researching some options, aren't we, Mom?" It was like a stab in the heart. My own son, planning to get rid of me as if I were a disposable object. That night, alone in my suffocating little room, I cried until I had no more tears. I remembered the years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights working to give him a better life, the times I went hungry so he could eat well, the clothes I didn't buy to pay for his school supplies. And now, he treated me like a burden, an old lady who gets in the way of his perfect life. In the following days, I tried to resign myself. Maybe it was better to leave that house, find a place where I could live with dignity, even if it was a small rented room in some corner of the city. I began to plan my exit, counting the few savings I had kept from the sale of the house in Millfield. It was on one of those nights while I was counting the bills hidden in an empty soapbox that I heard raised voices in the office. The door was ajar, and I recognized Jason and Melissa arguing. It wasn't my intention to spy, but when I heard my name, I stopped to listen. "We can't simply throw her into just any nursing home," Jason was saying. "We need a discreet place that doesn't raise suspicions." Melissa replied, irritated. "And why not? The old lady has no one, no relative who cares." We can say she preferred it that way, that she was unhappy here. My blood froze with my son's next words. "The problem isn't just that. If she goes to a regular nursing home, she'll continue to receive her pension. We need a place where we can manage that money, understand? That house in Millfield was worth more than she thinks. The money is invested, yielding well." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son not only wanted to get rid of me, but also to appropriate the little I had. The money from the sale of my house, which he said he was keeping for my security in old age, was being used by them. "And if she resists?" asked Melissa. Jason's answer completely destroyed me. "She won't. The old lady always did everything I wanted. She's a sentimental fool, thinks she owes me something for raising me, as if it were more than obligation. Old lady." That's how my only son referred to me, with the same contempt that Howard showed in the worst days. The same word, the same tone. As if I were nothing, as if my whole life of dedication wasn't worth a minimum of respect. Melissa laughed, a cold sound that gave me chills. "Your mother really is an old fool, thinks she still has some importance. I see how she tries to interfere, gives opinions about the baby, about the house. I can't wait to get rid of that old hag." I waited, with a broken heart, for my son to reprimand her, to defend the mother who sacrificed so much for him. Instead, I heard his laughter joining hers. "Old hag" echoed in my ears, in the voice of the boy I had cradled, fed, protected with my own life. I returned to my little room staggering, as if I had taken a physical blow. I sat on the bed, staring at nothing, trying to process the betrayal. It wasn't just the plan to send me away, to appropriate my money. It was the contempt, the gratuitous hatred. It was hearing my only son, the person I loved most in the world, call me old hag and laugh at my existence. That night, something died inside me. Love, hope, the capacity to forgive. In its place, a cold, calculating anger was born, a determination not to be a victim again, not to allow those who should protect me to destroy me from the inside, as Howard tried to do. As I stared at the ceiling of that cramped little room, I made a promise to myself. I would not be discarded like trash. I would not end my days in some nursing home at the mercy of my son's charity, while he and that woman enjoyed the fruit of my labor, laughing at the old hag they had the cleverness to deceive. What I didn't know yet was how far I would be willing to go to keep that promise. That inside that 63-year-old lady, apparently fragile and submissive, was a strength that even I didn't know. A strength born of decades of silenced pain, of swallowed humiliations, of unrequited love. A strength that was about to manifest itself in the most terrible way possible. After that night, something changed inside me. I started observing Jason and Melissa with different eyes. Every gesture, every word, every look gained a new meaning. I continued to play the role of the submissive mother, the mother-in-law who accepts everything without complaining. But inside, I was boiling. I began to pay attention to details. The phone conversations that ceased when I entered the kitchen. The papers they hid when I approached. The complicit looks exchanged over the dinner table. They were planning my future as if I were incapable of deciding for myself. One Sunday afternoon, while the couple had gone out to lunch with Melissa's family, without inviting me as usual, I took courage and entered Jason's office. I knew it was wrong, but I needed concrete evidence of what they had planned for me. Among the locked drawers of the desk, I found a folder with my name. Inside, documents from the sale of my house in Millfield, bank statements from an account I didn't know existed, and the most disturbing, brochures from an institution called Golden Sunset in a small town in rural Nebraska. It wasn't a regular nursing home. The photos showed an isolated, simple, almost precarious place. Along with it, a note in Jason's handwriting, agreed values, payment 5/5, admission 5/15. May 5th, 10 days from that Sunday. That was the deadline I had before being discarded. The shock was so great that I needed to sit down. My hands trembled so much I could barely replace the documents in the folder. I returned to my little room, my mind in turmoil. What to do? Where to go? I had no friends in Oakville, knew no one besides Melissa's family, who certainly wouldn't help me. My savings, which I discovered were being managed by Jason, wouldn't be enough to start over somewhere else. That night, when they returned, I kept a calm countenance. I served coffee as always, politely listened to reports of the lunch, agreed when Melissa said I looked tired and should retire early. "Yes, dear, I think I'll rest. Age weighs, you know," I replied, with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. In the safety of my little room, I cried silently, not of sadness or fear, but of anger, an anger that grew with each minute, fed by decades of unrecognized sacrifices. I took the only photo I kept of Jason as a child, that smiling boy for whom I would give my life. "Why?" I whispered to the image. "Why did you turn into this?" The following days were of internal torture. I continued the normal routine, trying not to raise suspicions. But with each false good morning from Melissa, each condescending look from Jason, I felt the anger grow. I began to have nightmares. I dreamed of that golden sunset, being left to die slowly, forgotten by everyone, while my son spent my money on his perfect family. On one of those sleepless nights, I remembered my grandmother Dorothy and her herbs. How she knew the power of each leaf, each root. "Some cure, others relieve, others can make you sleep forever," she would say, in conversations that weren't for childish ears, but that my girlish curiosity caught. I also remembered the herbs I grew in Millfield, the knowledge I inherited about their properties. On Thursday, 4 days before the date set for my admission, I asked Jason to take me to the market. "I want to make that cornbread you love," I explained, smiling like the dedicated mother I always was. He agreed, perhaps out of remorse, perhaps to keep up appearances until the end. At the market, besides the ingredients for the bread, I went to the plant section. I bought some common tea herbs, chamomile, lemon balm, mint. and others not so common, which I knew where to find. Jason, impatient, hardly paid attention to what I was putting in the cart. Back at the house, I began the preparations. Not just for the bread, but for what would come after. Hands that for decades had prepared food with love now worked with a different purpose. The cornbread was made and left to cool. The herbal tea was carefully prepared and stored in the refrigerator. That night, when Melissa complained of nausea due to pregnancy, I solicitously offered, "I have a tea that will help, my dear. My grandmother taught me it's infallible for discomfort." She hesitated, suspicious as always. But the discomfort won, and she accepted the steaming cup I offered her. "It has a strong taste," she commented, making a face. "It's because of the special herbs," I explained. "Drink it all, it'll take effect quickly." I watched as she emptied the cup, encouraged by Jason, who seemed pleased with my apparent concern for his wife. An hour later, Melissa began to feel sleepy. "Normal," I assured. "The tea relaxes, helps you sleep well." Jason helped her to the bedroom while I tidied the kitchen, humming an old song. When he returned, I offered him a slice of cornbread. "I just made it, warm as you like it." He accepted, eating with gusto. "It tastes different," he commented. "I put a special ingredient in," I replied, "a new recipe I learned." We waited for the effect of the herbs, sitting in the living room. I was finally serene, he increasingly drowsy. "Mom, I'm feeling strange," he said, his voice already slurred. "It's fatigue, son. You work so hard," I replied gently. "Come, I'll help you lie down." I led him to the bedroom, where Melissa was already sleeping deeply. I helped him lie down next to her. I stood there, watching the two of them. So beautiful, so young, with their whole lives ahead of them. A life built on my destruction. That's when Jason, already entering the deep sleep induced by the herbs, muttered, "On Sunday, nursing home." The words came out slurred, almost unintelligible, but they confirmed what I already knew. Sunday would be the day of my sentence. Something snapped inside me at that moment. A last thread of hope that maybe there was some mistake broke. I looked at my sleeping son and saw not the boy I raised, but the man he had become. A man just like his father, capable of using and discarding people like objects. I returned to the kitchen determined. I took the sharpest knife, the one Jason had given me as a Christmas present, saying I deserved quality utensils. The irony didn't escape me. I returned to the bedroom, the knife hidden in the folds of my dress. Melissa continued in a deep sleep. I approached her first. I didn't feel anger, just a cold determination. She was just a reflection of Jason, embracing his distorted values, his cruelty disguised as pragmatism. The pillow on her face was almost merciful. She barely struggled, already numbed by the tea. I maintained the pressure until her body completely relaxed. Then I turned to my son, the boy I carried in my womb for 9 months, whom I breastfed, whom I taught to walk and talk. The man who now planned to discard me like trash, who laughed while calling me old hag. "Jason," I called softly. His eyes opened, heavy with sleep. For an instant, he seemed confused to see me there, standing beside the bed in the dark. "Mom?" he muttered. "Yes, son. The old hag came to say goodbye." I saw the recognition in his eyes, the shock upon realizing that I knew. He tried to get up, but his body didn't obey, too heavy from the effect of the herbs. "What? You—" He tried to speak, his tongue thick. "Shh," I hushed, like when he was a child and had nightmares. "Mom's here. Mom has always been here, hasn't she? Sacrificing everything for you. And how did you repay me?" His eyes widened when he saw the knife. He tried to scream, but could only emit a muffled sound. Beside him, Melissa no longer moved. "You know what hurt the most?" I asked, surprisingly calm. "It wasn't the plan to send me away. It was hearing you call me that way, with the same contempt as your father. Tears ran down my face, but my voice was firm. I gave my life for you, Jason. Literally, my whole life. He tried to speak again, his eyes now pleading. But I didn't want to hear excuses or explanations. I didn't want any more empty words, false promises. I wanted only silence. The knife came down, not to kill. I couldn't take my son's life, no matter how much he deserved it, but to silence the cruel words. So that mouth could never again pronounce old hag to any mother. His scream was muffled by the effect of the herbs, turning into a horrible gurgle when blood began to gush. His eyes, wide with pain and disbelief, would haunt me forever. But at that moment, I felt only a strange peace, as if finally, after a lifetime of submission, I had taken control. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching my son struggle, trying to scream without a tongue, the blood staining the white sheets. I felt no pleasure or satisfaction, just a dark certainty that justice, in my distorted way, had been done. "Now you know what it's like, son," I whispered as he lost consciousness. Being silenced, being treated as nothing, feeling powerless. I ran my hand through his hair as I used to do when he was a child. "I loved you more than anything in this life, but you became just like your father." When it was all over, I sat there for hours, observing what I had done. I didn't try to escape or hide the crime. I knew the police would come, that I would be arrested, that I would spend the rest of my days in a prison. But any prison would be better than the golden sunset they had planned for me. At least in jail, I would have my dignity. I cleaned the knife on the hem of my dress and went to the living room. I sat on the couch, my hands still stained with my son's blood, and waited for dawn. When the sun began to enter through the cracks in the window, I picked up the phone and dialed 911. "Police department," said the voice on the other end. "How can I help you?" "My name is Eleanor Reed," I replied in a calm voice. "I just killed my daughter-in-law and cut out my son's tongue. Come get me." And so, at 63, I began a new phase of my life. Not as the beloved grandmother I dreamed of being, but as a murderer. The woman who forever silenced the words that tore her apart inside. The old hag, who showed what she was capable of when cornered. The days after the crime passed like a blur. I remember the arrival of the police, the cold handcuffs on my wrists, the horrified looks of the neighbors when I was taken away. The police station, the endless interrogations. "Why did you do it, ma'am?" they asked repeatedly. I always gave the same answer. Because they were going to discard me like trash. The case caused commotion in Oakville. The newspapers displayed sensationalist headlines. Monstrous mother kills daughter-in-law and mutilates son. Melissa's family gave inflammatory interviews, demanding justice, maximum penalty. No one wanted to hear my side of the story. I was just the crazy old woman who had suddenly gone mad. I was sent to the women's correctional facility where I waited for the trial. The other inmates avoided me at first. Even criminals have their codes, and attacking your own son is breaking a sacred taboo. I spent months in isolation, not as punishment, but for protection. "The others might hurt you," explained Officer Jenkins. "Better to stay alone for now." At the trial, my lawyer, Mr. Patterson, was appointed by the state, a young man, recently graduated, who clearly preferred not to be defending a family murderer. He barely looked me in the eyes during our conversations, always hurried, always uncomfortable. "Mrs. Williams," he said in one of the preparatory sessions, "you need to show remorse. Say that you weren't in your right mind, that you deeply regret it. It's the only chance to reduce your sentence." I looked at him calmly. "Mr. Patterson, I won't lie. I'm not remorseful. I did what I had to do to maintain my dignity. If I have to spend the rest of my life in jail, so be it. But I won't say I regret it." He sighed, frustrated. "You're making my job impossible." The trial was quick. The evidence was irrefutable. I myself had confessed. The prosecution presented the case as an act of pure evil, of senile madness. Jason, who survived but was left without a tongue, appeared in a wheelchair, apparently still debilitated by the trauma. He looked at me with hatred the entire time, unable to speak, but his eyes said everything. Mr. Patterson tried the temporary insanity argument, but his heart wasn't in it. I wasn't collaborating, remaining firm in my testimony. Yes, I had planned everything. No, I wasn't remorseful. Yes, I knew exactly what I was doing. The verdict was as expected, guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. The sentence, 30 years in prison with no possibility of parole due to advanced age and dangerousness. When the judge pronounced the sentence, I felt no fear or despair. I felt relief. Prison, as harsh as it might be, would be my home now. A place where I wouldn't be humiliated, where I wouldn't be called an old hag by the family that should love me. It was in the women's correctional facility that my life took an unexpected turn. After the trial, I was transferred to the regular pavilion. I expected hostility from the other inmates, but found something different. Curiosity first. Then, a strange form of respect. "Are you the one who cut out her son's tongue?" asked Brenda, a middle-aged inmate, while we were in the cafeteria. I nodded, expecting disapproval. "He must have deserved it," she commented. "No man treats his own mother like garbage and gets away with it." I soon discovered that many of those women had stories of abuse, abandonment, betrayal. Some had been victims of their own sons, husbands, fathers. Others had reacted and ended up there, like me. Gradually, I became a sort of mother figure in the pavilion. The younger ones sought me for advice, the older ones for conversations about the old days. The prison warden, Mrs. Thompson, called me to her office 6 months after my arrival. A serious, middle-aged woman with eyes that seemed to see through you. "Mrs. Williams," she said, "I've noticed that you have a positive influence on the other inmates. I'd like to propose something." The something was an occupational therapy program. I would teach crochet to those interested as a way to keep hands and minds occupied. "Many of these women never had a decent mother figure," explained Thompson. "You can offer that, besides teaching a useful skill." I accepted immediately. It was a chance to have a purpose again, to feel that my life still had some value. We started with a small group, 5 curious inmates. Soon the class grew to 15, then 30. My students learned not just crochet stitches, but also listened to stories from my life, the good parts before the betrayal. It was during one of these classes that I met Amanda, a young lawyer who visited the prison as part of a legal assistance program. She observed our class for some time and then asked to speak with me privately. "Mrs. Williams," she said when we were alone, "I read about your case in the newspapers, but I feel there's more to the story than was reported. Would you mind telling me your version?" For the first time, someone really wanted to listen to me. I told everything, from my childhood in Millfield to Jason and Melissa's plans to get rid of me. Amanda listened attentively, taking notes, asking occasional questions. When I finished, she seemed thoughtful. "There were serious flaws in your trial," she finally said. "Your lawyer didn't investigate the context, didn't present evidence of your son's plan to commit you against your will, didn't explore the history of psychological abuse. There's basis for an appeal." I looked at her surprised. "Appeal? For what? I did what I did, counselor. I don't deny it." "It's not about denying the facts," Amanda explained, "but about contextualizing them, showing that it wasn't an act of gratuitous malice, but an extreme reaction to a situation of prolonged abuse. This may not change your conviction, but it can significantly reduce your sentence." I hesitated. Part of me had already accepted my fate, found peace in the prison routine. But another part yearned for justice, not freedom necessarily, but recognition that I too had been a victim. "If you authorize me," continued Amanda, "I can request the case documents, investigate what really happened. Is there evidence of their plan? Those nursing home brochures, the financial documents you mentioned?" They must still be in the house, I replied, unless Jason got rid of them. I'll find out, she promised. And I'll talk to the neighbors, bank employees, anyone who might have witnessed how they treated you. You deserve a fair trial, Mrs. Williams, and you didn't have one. In the following months, Amanda worked tirelessly on my case. She discovered that Jason had transferred all the money from the sale of my house to accounts in his name. She found the contract with Golden Sunset, signed by him as my guardian, without my knowledge or consent. She interviewed the maid who worked in the house once a week and confirmed the degrading treatment I received. Most surprising of all, Amanda discovered that Melissa had a history of lawsuits against former domestic workers, all elderly, all accusing her of mistreatment and humiliation. A pattern of behavior that the court didn't know about. A year after our first meeting, Amanda filed a request for review of my sentence. The case returned to the headlines, but now with a different narrative. Abused elderly, the untold story, said one of the newspapers. Public opinion, previously totally against me, began to divide. Jason, now communicating through writing due to the mutilation, gave interviews denying everything, but the evidence was too solid. The judge accepted the review request and a new trial was scheduled. This time the court heard witnesses who hadn't been called before. The bank employee who saw Jason transfer my money to his personal accounts. The social worker from Golden Sunset who confirmed that the institution was known for mistreatment of the elderly. The maid who witnessed Melissa calling me an old hag repeatedly. Amanda was brilliant in her defense. She didn't deny my acts, but contextualized them within years of psychological abuse, forced isolation, and the imminent threat of being committed against my will in degrading conditions. Mrs. Williams reacted like a cornered animal, she argued. After decades of sacrifice for her son, she saw herself betrayed in the most cruel way possible, by the one who should protect her in old age. The new verdict reflected this more nuanced understanding. The murder conviction was maintained, but reclassified as homicide with relevant moral value, a significant reduction. My sentence was decreased to 10 years, with the possibility of progression to a semi-open regime after serving 1/3. When the judge announced the decision, I cried for the first time since the crime. Not with joy for the sentence reduction. After all, at 65, even 10 years could still mean the rest of my life. I cried because finally, someone had heard my story, recognized my suffering. Amanda hugged me after the trial. "It's not a complete victory," she said, "but it's justice in a way." "It's more than I expected," I replied, wiping my tears. Someone believed me. That's already a victory. Back at the correctional facility, I was received with a small celebration organized by my crochet students. They had made a cake, decorated the activity room. "You're our inspiration," said Lisa, one of the youngest. "You taught us that even in the worst moments, we can still find a purpose." In the following years, the crochet program grew and expanded. The pieces produced began to be sold at craft fairs, generating a small income for the inmates. Warden Thompson, seeing the success of the initiative, proposed similar programs, cooking, gardening, crafts in general. I became a kind of informal counselor, not just for the inmates, but even for some correctional officers. My cell, once a space of isolation, became a meeting point where women came to share problems, seek guidance, or simply talk. Amanda continued to visit me regularly, now more as a friend than a lawyer. It was she who brought the news, 3 years after the new trial. Jason had passed away. A car accident, apparently caused by himself. He was drunk, driving at high speed on a mountain road. "How do you feel?" she asked, concerned about my reaction. I was silent for a long time, processing the information. The boy I had carried in my womb, breastfed, raised with so much love, no longer existed. The cruel man he had become didn't either. "At peace," I finally replied. "I hope he found peace too." 2 years later, at 70, I was transferred to the semi-open regime. I could leave during the day to work, returning at night to the correctional facility. Amanda helped find a place for me at an artisans' cooperative where my crochet was valued and well paid. That's how, little by little, I built a new life. Not the one I dreamed of when I was young, certainly. Not as the grandmother I imagined being, surrounded by grandchildren. But a life with purpose, with dignity. A life where, despite everything, I managed to find some form of redemption. Today, at 73, I'm still serving my sentence. I still carry the weight of my actions. But I no longer see myself as a monster, as the newspapers portrayed me in the beginning. I see myself as a woman who, cornered by fate and the cruelty of those who should love her, reacted in the only way she could see at the moment of desperation. And if there's a lesson I learned in this whole process, it's that the real prison isn't the bars that surround us, but the cruel words, the contempt, the humiliation we suffer from those we trust. From these invisible prisons, I have already freed myself. The iron bars, with time, will also open. Here in Oakville, my routine now is very different from what I imagined for my old age. I wake up at 5 in the morning, as I've always done. Some habits you carry for life, don't you? I make my bed with care, take a quick shower in the communal facilities, and prepare for the day. At 6:30, I have breakfast in the prison cafeteria. It's no longer a hostile place for me. It's almost like a strange community where I found more respect and affection than in my own son's house. The correctional officers call me Mrs. L or Grandma, always with a smile. The younger inmates seek me for advice, to show me the crochet work they're doing, or simply to talk. At 7:30, I go out through the prison gates to my job at the Creating Hands Cooperative, a 15-minute walk from there. It's a welcoming place, a large warehouse with wide windows that let in plenty of natural light. Inside, about 20 women, some ex-inmates, others from underprivileged communities, work with various types of crafts: crochet, knitting, sewing, embroidery. My corner is near the window that overlooks the garden. I have a comfortable chair, adapted for my back that's not the same anymore, a small table with my needles and colored threads organized in small boxes. The cooperative coordinator, Margaret, insisted on preparing this space, especially for me. Mrs. Williams needs comfort to create her masterpieces, she said, and they are indeed small works of art, if I may say so. My crochet works are the most sought after in the cooperative. I mainly make shawls, baby blankets, and tablecloths. Each piece takes days, sometimes weeks to complete. As I work, I put into those delicate stitches all the stories of my life, the joys, the pains, the lessons learned. The other artisans frequently come to my table to ask for advice on difficult stitches or color combinations. Mrs. L has the eye, they say. It's true that I can see the potential in each piece. Imagine how it will look when finished. Maybe it's experience, maybe a natural gift that I only discovered late in life. At noon, we take a break for lunch. Usually, we eat together at a large wooden table at the back of the warehouse. Each brings her lunchbox, and we share what we have. Margaret always brings a little extra. For those who forgot lunch, she says, but I know it's mainly for me. She worries that I eat well. During these meals, we talk about everything: politics, soap operas, children, grandchildren. I'm the oldest in the group, and often they ask me to tell stories from back then. I talk about Millfield of my childhood, the 4th of July celebrations, working at the bakery. I avoid talking about the more recent past. Everyone there knows my story, but we prefer to focus on the present and future. In the afternoon, we continue working until 5. Then, I make the way back to the correctional facility, where I have to be before 6. On the way, sometimes I stop at the small neighborhood park to watch the children playing. I find myself imagining what it would be like if I had grandchildren, if I had had the chance to be that grandmother who bakes cookies on Sundays and tells stories at night. But I don't allow sadness to consume me. I've learned that lamenting what we don't have is losing the chance to appreciate what life has offered us. On Tuesday and Thursday nights, I coordinate the crochet workshop at the prison. It's a project that started small, as I told you, but today serves almost 50 inmates at different times. Many arrive not knowing how to hold a needle and leave producing beautiful pieces. More important than manual skill, however, is what happens during the classes. Women who carry heavy stories of violence, abandonment, and mistakes find a space to speak, to be heard. You're not just learning crochet, I always say at the beginning of each new class. You're learning patience, persistence, the ability to transform something broken into something beautiful. Crochet is a metaphor for life. One wrong stitch doesn't mean the whole piece is ruined. We can undo, start over, adapt the design. On Saturdays, I receive visits, not from family members, as none remain, but from people who have become my chosen family. Amanda comes almost always, bringing books, crochet magazines, and news from the outside world. She got married 2 years ago and is expecting her first child. "I want you to be his honorary grandma," she told me once, making me cry with emotion. Margaret also appears occasionally, bringing special orders from customers who admire my work. "There's a lady in Chicago who only buys your shawls, Mrs. L," she reported recently. She says she can feel the life story in every stitch. On Sundays, I participate in the ecumenical service in the small prison chapel. I'm not very religious in the traditional sense, but I've found a late spirituality that comforts me. Pastor Nancy, an energetic middle-aged woman, taught me that God doesn't just judge our actions, but knows our hearts. "Even the saints have a past," she often says. "The important thing is the path we choose to follow after our falls." In moments of solitude, usually at night before sleeping, I still think of Jason. Not the man who betrayed me, but the boy he once was. I look at the only photo I kept of him, taken when he was 5, smiling without his front teeth. Where did we lose ourselves? How did that sweet boy transform into the man who planned to discard his own mother? I have no answers, just the certainty that life rarely follows the paths we plan. In my small space in the correctional facility, I don't call it a cell, I prefer room, I have some treasures, a collection of books borrowed from the library, crochet magazines, some pieces I'm working on. On the wall, I hung a picture that one of the inmates painted for me, a maple tree, like the one that was in the yard of my house in Millfield. "Strength and rebirth," she wrote in the dedication. "Like you, Mrs. L. My health, considering everything, is good. I have high blood pressure, controlled with medication, and arthritis in my hands that sometimes makes crochet difficult. But nothing serious, nothing that prevents me from following my routine. The prison doctor, Dr. Lewis, says I have the energy of someone 20 years younger. Maybe it's true. I feel stronger now, at 73, than I felt at 60, living in that house where I was treated like a burden. In 2 years, if all goes well, I'll be able to request progression to the open regime. That would mean having my own little house, maybe a small apartment here in Oakville. Amanda is already researching options, quiet places where I can live my last years in peace. You'll have a little corner of your own, with a porch to put your plants and do your crochet, she promises. I don't have big dreams for the future. I don't seek luxury or extraordinary comforts. I just want to continue having a purpose, being useful, creating beauty with my hands. I want to wake up each day knowing that someone cares if I'm well, if I'm alive. Paradoxically, it was in prison that I found the freedom I never had. Freedom to be myself, to be respected for who I am, not for what others expect of me. Here, no one calls me old hag. Here, I am Mrs. L., the talented artisan, the wise counselor, the reliable friend. I'm not proud of what I did. Taking a life, mutilating my own son, these are acts I carry with regret in my conscience. If I could turn back time, I would seek other exits, other paths. But I can't change the past, only decide how I will live the present and the future that remains for me. And I choose to live with gratitude for the small joys, the sun coming through the cooperative window, illuminating the colorful yarn balls, the smile of an inmate upon completing her first crochet piece, Amanda's tight hug during Saturday visits, the bird song I hear in the morning on the way to work. It's these small things that keep me alive, that make me want to get up each day with the desire to continue. Life didn't give me what I dreamed of, but it taught me to value what I have. And for that, despite everything, I am grateful. My dear viewers who have come this far listening to this old lady's story, I want to leave you with some words that come not from wisdom, but from hard experience, lived in my own skin. If there's one thing I've learned in this long and tortuous life, it's that the cruelest prisons are not made of concrete and bars. They're built with words of contempt, looks of disgust, gestures of rejection. Words like, old hag, cut deeper than any knife, leave invisible scars that bleed inside every day. No one is born ready for cruelty, neither I nor my son. We are shaped by circumstances, by the examples we see, by the wounds we carry. Jason grew up seeing his father mistreat me. And despite all my effort to be different, to give him a better example, the seed was already planted. When you raise your children, remember, they don't listen to what we say, but observe what we do. When life puts us in a situation of desperation, each one reacts in a different way. Some submit, accept the imposed fate. Others flee, try to start over. I chose a different path, a dark path I don't recommend to anyone. But I understand now that, at that moment, with my limitations, it was the only path I could see. I'm not here to justify what I did. Taking a life is never justifiable. But I am here to say that even in the darkest moments, when we think there's no way out, there is always a light, however small. Maybe I couldn't see it at that moment. Maybe I was too blinded by pain and fear. If you're going through a situation of abuse, humiliation, isolation, whether from a child, a partner, a family member, don't wait to reach the point I reached. Seek help. Talk to someone. In any country, in any culture, there are people and organizations ready to extend a hand. The shame should not be yours, but that of the abuser. Silence only protects the aggressor. To the children who are listening to me, I want to say, remember that your parents will grow old. One day, those strong hands that carried you will become shaky. That firm voice that guided you will become hesitant. That body that sheltered you will become fragile. Don't see this as a burden, but as an opportunity to return the love received. Respect is not something given out of obligation, but out of recognition of the value that each human being has, regardless of age. To the elderly who might identify with parts of my story, I say, your life has value. Your needs matter. Your feelings are valid. Don't accept being treated as a burden, as someone disposable. You built the world in which today's young people live. Your knowledge, your experience, your very existence deserves dignity. When I look back at the path I've traveled, I see many mistakes, many pains, but also some successes. It was a difficult journey, but I discovered a strength in me that I didn't know existed. The same strength that I once used to destroy, today I use to create beauty, to teach, to counsel. Age is not a curse, but a privilege denied to many. Each wrinkle tells a story, each white hair marks a lesson learned. The body may weaken, but the soul can strengthen with each day. I discovered this late, but still in time to transform the years that remain to me into something meaningful. Forgiveness is a long and difficult road. I'm still learning to forgive my son for his betrayal, my husband for his abuse, and especially myself for not having found a better way out. But with each piece I weave with my old hands, with each piece of advice I give to a young inmate, I feel that I'm one step closer to redemption. Sometimes, in the quietness of the night, I imagine how my life would have been if I had had the courage to report Jason's plans, if I had sought legal help, if I had simply fled. Perhaps today I would be in a simple little house somewhere, perhaps lonely but free. But I can't change the past, only learn from it and try to do differently in the time I have left. Life has these ironies. It was in prison that I found freedom. It was among criminals that I found humanity. It was after taking a life that I truly learned to value each day given to me. If my story serves for one single person to avoid the path I took, for one single child to treat their parents with dignity, for one single elderly person to find courage to seek help before it's too late, then it will have been worth sharing it. My dear viewers who watched me to the end, with an open heart, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. This is important because each subscription helps bring these real stories, these painful lessons, to more people who may be going through the same thing I went through. Each view is a chance for someone to recognize the signs of abuse before it's too late. Leave in the comments the word prison. Only those who watched until the end will understand the deep meaning of this word in my journey. Do it now. Don't wait even one more minute. Your participation can literally save the lives of elderly people who are suffering in silence. And always remember, no matter your age, your social condition, your past mistakes, you deserve respect, you deserve love, you deserve to live with dignity until the last of your days. This is the message I leave, from the bottom of my heart marked by scars, but still beating with hope.